name's Dan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Forumm, and I'm joined by Rob Armstrong. Wave up there, that's Rob. He's from Caffeine, and Naomi Clark. Yeah, good way. From High School of Glasgow, and Johnny Wootton from, where are you from? Leeds Business School.
Leeds University Business School.
Yeah, Leeds Business School. So guys, just before we kick off, a bit of promotion around Forumm. I have to do this. So we are a company that supports organizations doing good in the world. We've got a consultancy branch, and we also have a technology branch. So this webinar actually is being hosted on our very own platform, which is our webinar platform. So if any of these types of things you want to do in the future, please get in touch. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about. But now I'm going to pass it along to Rob. Why don't you kick us off? I'm going to ask you to tell me what you do, what your company does. And I did say that I might throw in like an interesting question. So I've been thinking about this today. If you had to choose a sweet treat, what would it be? So we'll end with that. Rob, you go first.
Yeah, good job. I watched the last webinar, so I've been planning for this.
What did I do the last one? I can't remember.
I don't know, but it was still. I know that you do throw in these questions. So yeah, I'm Rob Armstrong. I'm from Caffeine. We're a sort of social media consultancy, primarily working with higher education. We've worked with Dan and the team. We do quite often the jobs that people don't have time for or want to do themselves, which can often be benchmarking and audits, which is why I think I've been invited along to speak today. Sweet treat, I think anything chocolate, but I would go with Snickers cheesecake from the cafe in Bali that I'm involved in, just as a sideline project.
Yeah. All right. So you got to go to Bali for your sweet treat.
Yeah. Good
Great.
excuse.
Very accessible. Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Naomi, why don't you go?
Sure. Hi, I'm Naomi Clark. I work at the High School of Glasgow, which is an independent school in Glasgow, and I head up the marketing and communications there. In terms of a sweet treat, I actually have more of a savory tooth, if that's a thing. I would way prefer to have crisps over sweets or chocolate, but yeah, if you were twisting my arm, I'd probably pick a tiramisu. I love coffee, so anytime I can have coffee in a dessert, yeah, I would definitely go for that.
Okay, fine. A favorite crisp then?
Favorite crisp? Oh my gosh. I mean, I love anything salt and vinegar. I quite like a posh crisp, like a Tyrrell, probably, I would have to say.
Oh, is that how you pronounce it? That was Tyrrell.
Oh, a Tyrrell, I think, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Thanks, Naomi. Maybe I'm probably wrong. Johnny, you go.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Johnny Wootton, Senior Marketing Manager within Leeds University Business School, which is part of the University of Leeds. My team mainly focus on B2B marketing communications. And yeah, my favorite treat, it threw me a little bit, but more recently it's a Lion Bar, because I've not had one for years, and I had one the other day. I was like, actually, yeah, this can go up there. This is quite good.
A Lion Bar?
Lion Bar,
yeah. Those are pretty good, actually.
Quite old school, I think.
Okay, well, because I asked you guys, I will say at the moment, cinnamon roll.
Oh, great choice.
Yeah. We've got Anna Rosa in the office here as well, who works for Caffeine Company, and whenever she comes in, she brings me a cinnamon roll. I'm looking at her now. I don't know if she's watching. Is she watching? Yeah, she's waving. Yeah, she's watching from the room. Cool. Okay. But then we're not talking about sweet treats. We are talking about benchmarking and auditing. Inherently, those words kind of fill most people with dread, I would assume. They're kind of aligned with like an audit. You think, oh gosh, it's going to be like figures and all this kind of stuff from accountancy and stuff like that. But I thought we'd give this topic a bit of discussion, because we have been seeing kind of recently a bit of a rise of universities and schools kind of actually taking stock when it comes to their social media and trying to apply some of that stuff over. So the reason why I invited all three of our guests today, Johnny and Naomi, we've worked quite closely with in the past, or even currently. Naomi, we're working together at the moment. And then Rob, just consistently working from trying to find the facts and figures around statistics for that. So it is quite an interesting topic, but I'm going to start with kind of the importance of the why. And I think the why behind why benchmarking is crucial to kind of starting a process of a social media strategy, for example. And I think the best person to probably kick us off is probably Rob around that. Are you okay kind of answering that? And then I'll pass to the other two in terms of why is it actually important to benchmark before starting anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to split that why into two. I think the first bit is understanding why you want to compare yourself to others, because sometimes that motivation can be misguided or led by maybe the wrong goals. So if somebody just wants to know whether somebody's better than somebody else on social media, are we getting more likes? Are we doing that? That can lead you down a path that won't have value for what you're trying to achieve in the future. So I think there's definitely that sort of be careful element to setting up any benchmarking, any audit you do. But when you actually start to really understand your why, you can then help plan the activity itself. So if you know your goal is to recruit more students, or your goal is to maybe boost your reputation amongst a certain audience, if you're then going in with that strategic mindset, understanding the journey you want to take yourself on with your strategy project, or even just analyzing your content over, say, the last quarter, you are getting to a point where you're understanding your objectives of your piece of research, picking a sensible set of competitors, comparators, aspirational brands that you want to compare yourself to. And I think that certainly helped shape what you're then trying to analyze, rather than just blindly going into, are we better than, in the context of universities, the others in our mission group, or given one of the league tables has just come out, and there's a report out there about vice chancellors and their pay being linked to league table performance. You could quite easily go off into just seeing who's the top of a league table, but they might not be relevant to you. So I think there's a relevancy to setting your goals, to then know your outcomes, because then you can look back and look forward at what you've achieved with your research, and set yourself that strategy for the future, which, hopefully Johnny and Naomi can then sort of contribute of their experience of that.
So I think, so from a university or school perspective, Johnny, you look like you're ready to talk. So you made that face like you're about to say something. So I'm going to throw it to you first. Why did you decide that Leeds Business School needed an audit and a benchmark of their social media?
Yeah, so it's interesting for us. We instigated it within our own team mainly because at the moment we don't have loads of resource, so we don't have a dedicated person towards social media. But there is a clear drive to kind of improve our engagement and think about how our other department pages work as well. So we're mainly thinking about LinkedIn, and we have a lot of other departmental LinkedIn accounts as well. But everyone's doing this as kind of not their main jobs. They're doing a really good job so far, but it's only kind of, say, part-time on the accounts. Yeah, so for us, we really wanted to understand kind of how is our content currently performing, and then how do we make sure that we improve our engagement without adding any additional workload and give the right support to people as well. So yeah, it's really important for us that we knew why we were doing it, because otherwise I think a lot of reports and kind of benchmarking and audits it's a lot of data that you then just don't use anything when you're not really sure about what you're going to do next. And I think the worst thing with that is that sometimes other people might get used or get hold of an audit or report and then make kind of different objectives on the back of that, and actually start to try and make use of it kind of retrospectively, which I think is quite dangerous. But yeah, for us, it's going to really help us to think about, what type of content we should be producing, when should we be posting, how do we work with other people as well across the business school to think about what type of content is going to work and what format we need to have it in. So yeah, really important for us, but it was more instigated by ourselves rather than any other driver. So yeah, and it should really help us now to strategize over the next year and think about, what is the best approach? How do we get more efficient with what we're doing as well? So yeah, that's kind of the reason why I went down there, really clear with kind of the objective to assess where we are right now, and then how do we adapt our approach moving forwards without adding kind of loads of resource into the team, because that's not really going to be achievable.
Yeah, I think we'll come on to kind of that efficiency side. But before we do, Naomi, from the High School of Glasgow, and I'm also very aware that we literally just presented last week your report and we only talked about like competitors and stuff like that in the meeting because it just kind of went on. But what are your thoughts about kind of when we said, well, we should probably start with kind of taking stock of what you guys are currently doing and what the competitors are doing on their social?
Sure, yeah. We're absolutely in the midst of it right now. So I feel like I almost don't have that bird's eye view. I'm very much in the weeds. But yeah, essentially, obviously it was the best place to kind of start to really be able to kind of take stock of the landscape. It's been a really like just sort of changing and challenging time for independent schools this year, with Labour bringing in VAT on school fees. It's, you know, it's made the stakes higher, and so it was kind of a good time to think, right, let's actually really think about our social media strategy. And coupled with that, we have a change of leadership in the school. So our current rector, who's been in place as rector for 10 years, he's worked in the school for 21, is retiring. And we have a new rector joining. So again, it's a nice sort of, it's a kind of organic point in which to do a sort of benchmarking and auditing exercise. And I suppose, yeah, we anecdotally keep an eye on, you know, what competitors are doing, and we kind of, again, anecdotally know what works on our channels. But yes, I'm maybe going more into the efficiency question. But yeah, I think essentially what we were wanting just to invest in efficiency, like for the future, within a small team. School teams are, I know uni teams are small, school teams are usually even smaller. So yeah, that was definitely, sorry, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but that's definitely.
No,
yeah.
I think it's good because we kind of initially came in with like, okay, let's look at a strategy to support what you guys are doing well for the next year. And kind of we said, you know, it's really nice to start with that benchmarking or that audit of your, so I guess audit of your current channels, benchmark against sector ones. And you guys did kind of jump at the chance of being like, okay, this would be nice to see. And I do feel like it's a piece of work that anyone can do within a team. I think it's just that the limited amount of time for something that's so important, which kind of leads me on to the next question, which is completely a sales-driven question, because why should you hire us to do it? But the main thing is, what are the reasons behind kind of the external benchmarking support? And Naomi, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, great.
Kind of carries
Yeah. No, it does, exactly. Yeah. So essentially, like our team is small and we're stretched pretty thin. You know, we don't have anyone that solely focuses on social media. There's a couple or a few people that, you know, do a bit as part of a wider workload. So yeah, and schools are obviously super busy. So during term times, we're just reacting. We're getting tons of content, which is fantastic because in the schools, so much goes on basically every single day. But we never get the chance, you know, to like take a step back, and like holidays are usually good. So obviously summer holidays are coming up. So holidays are sometimes a chance to sort of get off the treadmill and yeah, try and take more of a bird's eye view. But then it's funny because you say that, but actually when it comes to the holidays, you're then looking forward and then you're planning, and you know that doing an exercise like this would be good, but it just falls down the priority list. So I think unless you fully commit to a process, you know, with an external kind of company that can hold your feet to the fire and can kind of drive it, I think that actually ends up with results. And I think the other thing is, we're so immersed in the school and the ways of working, and you know, our school's been around for 901 years, so it's quite a long time. So it's good to be able to get that, somebody that's at a bit more of an arm's length, you know, rather than people that were so entrenched in it, we almost don't see the wood from the trees at times. So you guys have been really good at being able to kind of provide that, that fresh pair of eyes and that, you know, alternative perspective.
Can I use that quote that we held your feet to the fire?
Yeah.
Put it on the website.
Yeah.
Johnny, what about you, pal? What are your thoughts on kind of having that, you know, being able to step away and see the wood for the trees?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, Naomi, we've probably got very similar challenges. So time is definitely one of them. I think that yeah, having the time to kind of run through the level of depth that we've been through with this exercise, just I don't think we'd be able to commit that much time to it, or at least we wouldn't be able to do it in the same amount of time throughout the project. So that's really been really important, but also kind of the expertise as well. I think that because we're not solely focused from a social media perspective, that we might miss things or might have a few gaps, and just knowing that external kind of experts can guide you through that is really, really important. But yeah, I think the other side of it though is definitely around that fresh perspective. There's certain things that as you go on as a team, you'll see day in, day out, and you just normalize things as well. So kind of inconsistencies with kind of branding and other kind of pieces of content that you kind of see quite a bit, but in our team we see it all the time. So over time you kind of accept things as well. So that fresh perspective's really good, and picking out some things you would never normally kind of see internally with your own team. But yeah, the other thing as well is probably that objective view as well. So this is going to, from an independent source as well, using this report now internally, it's a little bit easier. There's no like hidden agenda or anything like that. It's purely this is the fact of where we are right now. So I think that really helps us in terms of having that kind of complete independent objective report that will really help us. So I think that's probably the other element. But yeah, Naomi kind of covered my points.
It's good to kind of do that. Before I pass over to Rob to talk about a similar theme, I will say we are getting some questions in the event chat, guys. So if anyone's watching, they want to put the questions in there, I will try and kind of intersperse them throughout. We've got one from Alex, but I'm going to, Alex, if you're okay, I'm going to wait till a little bit later on to ask you a question. It's about kind of competitors and looking at the analytics but behind the scenes. Alex is absolutely fine. And Alex and I actually caught up last week. Yeah, Alex from Brighton. Anyway, Rob, do you want to weigh in on that in terms of the external perspective? I know you're not really you used to work at Bath, but and you're from the external side, but can you weigh in on the importance of using external for a benchmark?
Yeah, I think in today's climate where money is a big issue when it comes to doing anything, first off, you might get a manager that says, we can't afford to spend on an external consultant. But if you look at that from a balance of, do you really need a data analyst in your team 24/7, or do you need the technology that an external consultancy might have to do benchmarking, analysis, research for you? You could end up getting sort of that value for money through paying someone to do a one-off report, because if you're doing benchmarking every 5 minutes, you're going to have no time whatsoever to do anything else. Both Naomi and Johnny have talked about the limited resources they've got, and this not necessarily being their entire focus. So you don't want to do the benchmarking all the time. So setting yourself a task where you go, right, well, we'll do that once a year, once every 2 years, the value piece comes in there. I think the other side of it is that external eye has the opportunity to, spot patterns that you don't. We're doing this day in, day out, and I've currently got some support tickets in with LinkedIn because I've spotted errors in data that have come about through working on 2 or 3 different projects where I'm starting to spot things that individually brands wouldn't spot, but because I'm seeing that sort of umbrella view, I'm starting to see things that maybe aren't reliable in their data. And if you're internally relying on a platform's analytics and you go, well, we don't know there's a problem, we're just reporting on that. So I think, it comes back to getting something that is valuable for you, because there are industry reports that they're quite broad, they're quite wide, that if you get something that has more meaning to your organization, you can do more with it. But as I say, I don't think you need somebody in your team the whole time. So paying for somebody to do a one-off report for you to use for 1-2 years for a strategy project is going to be far more economical and free up time for you to do what you need to do, and that's delivering the content or plan.
I think I'm going to tie in Alex's question now, because I think it works quite well with what you're saying, Rob. He's asking about how do we actually benchmark against competitors if we can't see their analytics and reach behind the scene? and how do you ratio in relation to competitors' social media following differences? And I think what I'd like to caveat this with is there's kind of two elements of a benchmarking and an audit process. One is kind of looking at it as a quantifiable element, and so that's kind of looking at all the figures, which can be quite limited unless, and I'm going to pass over to Rob to explain that part. But there's also kind of the qualitative, so looking at the quality of the content, which you actually need like a human brain for, where the numbers will say a very important story and trickle things up to the top for you, but without kind of actually having to look at kind of the quality of the content, the comments, likes, engagements based off of those top posts. There's that kind of completes the picture for you. So, but Rob, what I'll do is kind of pass over to you to kind of say kind of how do you benchmark against competitors in terms of the limitations posed by the channels themselves.
Yeah, I think, well, there's, I forget about this as well, there's also in benchmarking yourself and your own performance, of which you will have your own. So I think, we can talk about competitors, aspirational, compared to whoever, but I think there's also a piece in this that maybe we'll touch on a bit later as well, which is, just getting your own benchmarks of your own internal performance to set your own goals, because you have all of that data, even if it is a bit painful to bring together sometimes. But from the external competitors, you're correct, Alex, you won't know about maybe even their internal goals. That's one thing that we're blind to quite often. We know we're all trying to recruit students, but we don't know in what necessarily percentage or capacity. But when it comes to the tools, there are different APIs. So the connections that out of Meta, for example, allow benchmarking tools, and we use Brandwatch's benchmark tool for ourselves. That allows to bring in follower data, engagement, some content, public. There's a public API for that. It won't give you some of the more internal factors, and sometimes these APIs, they vary between channel. LinkedIn might not give you anything, whereas TikTok's quite new with its API. They're all at different stages. They're not all going to give like for like, but they will give you some common elements. And I think it's then building on what Dan said of going, right, okay, well, we've got some data. It may have painted a picture. Where do we then go and spend our time to dig into the content? It, for example, may have told us that two of our competitors are doing better on Instagram carousel posts versus video. And if you're spending all your time on video and you want to do better than those two competitors, delving down into what carousel posts they're putting out might be where that data then leads you into that sort of analyzing phase of sort of the content. So taking it beyond the numbers. It's never going to be perfect. There is some manual stuff that we still do for some of the platforms. But it is hopefully, over time, I think each platform gets a bit competitive with each other. And as a result, the APIs improve and tools get more features. We're seeing that with TikTok, for example. They're starting to roll out more data sources for analytics tools to be able to plug in.
Take a breath.
I could talk all day about APIs, but
I know. I feel like, yeah, that's why Rob is so good at what he does. All right, let's keep going. Alex, hopefully that answered your question. But I've got a bit of a question that's kind of off script from this. But Naomi, I guess when we just did kind of a discussion last week when we came into the school and kind of looked at three of your competitors. We won't name them because, but were there any kind of elements of that kind of jumped out? I'd be like, oh, what they're doing is actually quite cool. And it'd be good if we were able to kind of take or adapt some of the things that they're doing to ours.
Sure. I think the biggest thing that was the most interesting kind of takeaway from that session was the fact that we've always prided ourselves on our frequency of posting. So we post a lot all the time on all our channels. And it's funny because I think we always thought that was such a good thing. And we knew we were doing a lot more than competitors. But actually, when we went through the kind of the exercise with you, we looked at like in terms of followers, in terms of frequency of posting, and we saw that we're putting loads of time and effort into posting all the time, but actually maybe in terms of engagement metrics it doesn't correlate, and we're actually potentially diluting interest because we're putting out too much, so therefore we're getting less of a reaction because people just are like so used to seeing our posts, whereas some of our competitors have dialed it back. They're doing less, but they're getting way more, interaction and engagement on those posts. So I think really interestingly, that obviously makes a business case for us to scale it back. Don't post so much, and be a lot more considered. So where you're saving that time, you can then build that into the workflow for figuring out, okay, so you're posting less, but then the things that you're posting are going to have more value. So I think that was the biggest thing that for me and for the team, we just thought, wow, okay, that's super interesting. And I think some of our competitors are maybe just slightly more considered with the storytelling element. So there's maybe, that's maybe something we need to think about a bit more. I think we do try and
spot.
We do try and lean into storytelling, but sometimes perhaps we're too abrupt. So maybe it's just trying to find that emotional kind of resonance and that connection again that, does nudge people along and, make it more likely that they'll maybe do something that ultimately, whether it's a retention thing with current families or recruitment with new families, maybe there's a slight pivot that we need to do there.
Was there anything from yours, Johnny? I know we did yours quite some time ago, but was there any elements of things that kind of bubbled up to the surface where you could find, and this kind of leads me on to kind of the efficiency discussion. Was there any elements there that kind of jumped out at you?
Yeah, it was interesting actually when we talked about trying to look at the analytics of competitors. Sometimes quite hard, isn't it, to actually understand kind of why they're posting certain things and kind of why they're getting so much more engagement. But interesting, we found kind of like 6 different themes of content that's produced by all of our competitors. And then if you put it into that perspective and looked at that theme and then compared that to the different content that's been used within themes, you actually benchmark yourself in a really interesting way where in some areas we'd be seen to be actually really strong. And in other areas, maybe not as strong, talking about like community and things like that. But when we talked about prestige, we actually did perform quite well. So we saw that actually there's like different themes to be benchmarking ourselves against. And then within that, thinking about, okay, so in those themes, what content will work the best as well, as opposed to kind of thinking like a broad stroke on average, this is how much engagement we're getting per post. That really wasn't useful for us because it might be that, sometimes we're posting a little bit more, a little bit less, and the engagement would vary quite a bit. But if you did it by the themes, then it would allow us to actually benchmark in a much better way, in a much more kind of cohesive way as well. So we could see kind of where are the gaps that we've got and where we're producing content in the wrong format for that particular theme of content. So it's quite interesting. It really helps us to kind of think about, okay, so moving forwards, how do we plan our content throughout the year in respect to the themes, as opposed to just thinking just a content plan throughout the year effectively. So it allows us to be a lot more concise really moving forwards. So it's a really good kind of process to work through actually.
Well, let's jump into kind of the theme element. I know I'm skipping over one of the sections around fish food. We'll come back to it, but I think there has what I've seen at least is a shift from boxing audiences into channels, and also looking at audiences based off of specific demographics. So I think it makes it really difficult for a content creator to put on different hats for each audience. So I'm a grandparent now, and I'm going to be posting on Facebook about this. What are they going to want to hear? Or I'm a 17-year-old looking at prospective student. What TikTok dance do I need to do, and that kind of stuff. So I think I've seen an evolution just in terms of different types of individuals using different channels. I think from a content perspective, Johnny, what you're talking about is themes of content versus specific audience groups. And I want to maybe have a discussion about that, like whether you think that's right, or is that the right approach to take in terms of what you're putting out there. Johnny, I'll let you answer, and then I might actually come to Rob to talk about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I guess to say that the themes, I think traditionally with some business schools might be thinking about the kind of audience groups. So you might think about as like prospective undergraduates or prospective masters or PGT students, or potentially for something like executive education, thinking about the business community. But when we looked at it, realistically, the themes aren't really that as well, because a lot of the content in there applies to them all anyway. So our themes were more around thought leadership, prestige, student success stories. That's maybe a little bit more specific. But then there's also like events, the community, celebration, achievements, and kind of more of the fun campus moments as well, which is kind of the theme we didn't pick up until after the benchmarking. So yeah, I think it has changed quite a bit. I think maybe you used to kind of try and produce content really specifically for a particular audience on your socials, but now things changed a lot. So kind of the content here would actually apply to a lot of different audience groups that we have, especially thinking around the prestige and the thought leadership pieces as well. Yeah, it's definitely switched. So that's how we benchmarked as well. So instead of thinking about audience groups, we did it by themes of content. So taking the audience out of it a little bit. As I say, student success story is a little bit different because that was a bit more focused and kind of maybe more undergraduate or maybe like more master students or maybe from someone who's been on an executive education program. So that's a little bit different, but still kind of what they're talking through and the themes they're talking through applies to all anyway.
Yeah. Well, Rob, what are your thoughts on that in terms of audience versus themes? Or, I mean, they are quite intertwined, but what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's difficult because you've got, I think, a subset of your organization that maybe haven't necessarily moved with the trends of social media and still expect you to work in those very traditional pillars. I don't know whether she's joined or not, but I'll give a nod to Rebecca at Thread and Fable because she talks about this much better than I do. But the work she's been doing around sort of fandoms and tribes and telling me about that and telling some of our clients, where you could have a 50-year-old football fan and a 17-year-old football fan both signed up to a WhatsApp group about the FA women's football team, for example. And it's quite interesting that only in the last few weeks I've been getting emails from Facebook's fandoms team. They are going down that, and I think that sort of that tribe, that relationship with whatever that affinity is. And for a business school, that could be a group of marketing students, and for a school it could be the house that you're in. I remember I was in a particular house when I was at school. That was your sports team, that was all your activities. When you went out on trips, you were sort of had a relationship with that group. So I think that's sort of starting to sort of play a lot more than those traditional audiences, which does make it a bit harder when it comes to sort of benchmarking, because you could end up with 50 different benchmarks very easily. But I think it's something that we're going to have to be a lot smarter about and mindful. But you can then maybe, that's where we go back to that picking the data to use the patterns to then where you go down and spend your time for your quick wins before you then maybe have to go down. Because particularly if you're short on resources, where can you make the most impact? Just those traditional models, I think, will maybe see you wasting your time. So finding those audiences in whatever form they now take, I think you'll spend far better time and energy to get your outputs.
Yeah. So we'll move over to the efficiency. I'm going to come over to you, Naomi, but I know we kind of outlined some content themes, I guess, but also kind of looking at it in terms of like tiers of these are our top themes, and especially kind of when you're talking about kind of the frequency of your posting, that you're looking, okay, is this having an effect? But do you feel like having your themes for the year from a content, do you feel like that will save the team time in terms of the content creation, or at least focus it a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it does is it really articulates like clear guidelines. I think that works especially well in kind of in a school environment. If we're able to kind of really clearly set out, these are like the 5 different themes that we know work, that our audience, are interested in and engage with. And therefore, if we're being shared content or if we're going out to find content, it has to fit into one of those themes. And then therefore anything that kind of gets through that initial kind of gateway will then escalate, but things that don't, it just allows us to kind of leave that where it is. So yeah, it kind of acts as a filter for what gets posted, and kind of stops kind of the distraction, because we could just post all the time, but when it's not kind of got an obvious kind of call to action, or it isn't fitting in a particular kind of theme, it's essentially wasted time. And I think there's that point of over time, okay, maybe it's just one post that doesn't land well, but then actually, you multiply that across a week, across a month, across a term, and it's a massive waste of like resource and time. So I think the themes just help to keep things really kind of clear. And I think is essentially having kind of articulating clear guidelines is the best way for us to kind of move forward.
Let's dig into that a little bit more in terms of the internal, without kind of laying it all bare in terms of what happens behind the scenes at the High School of Glasgow. I think kind of let's have a quick chat about kind of the from the results of an audit of your own channels. And I know we've got the benchmark for competitors, but audit from your own channels. How does that help, or does that detract from kind of that internal push of posting things all the time? Do you feel like that report will, I'm sure it obviously will, but like, how do you think that going forward, that's going to support your team with internal politics?
Sure. I guess one of the things we'd really like to be able to do is in our in-service day after the summer, that's always a kind of a good opportunity to, when all the kind of teaching staff and support staff are together, it would be a really good opportunity to be able to kind of present a really clear view of how social media is working for us going forward. So again, I just think, this work very much feeds into that. And and again, I think it makes it easier to push back, because it's not like you're pushing back for the sake of pushing back, or you're being difficult. Because ultimately, everyone's just trying to help. People sharing, like teachers sharing content with us, they're doing it with the best will in the world, and we're so grateful to them for doing that. But sometimes, I think so. If they understand that you're not just dismissing, then they think, oh well, fine, okay, I won't share things. So, you kind of dampen that enthusiasm. So we really want to foster it and encourage it. I think, again, if we're not clear on what we're looking for, how are they supposed to know? So again, I think, that's what makes it so kind of useful to us.
Johnny, we haven't heard from you in a while. What do you think about kind of the internal side of things and kind of the implementation? So we've done the benchmark, we've done the audit, you've got kind of built into maybe a more strategic approach, but then what's the next step? Like, what do you... you can't just leave it on a computer somewhere. Like, you have to implement it somehow. How do you envision that kind of working within the business school?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things. It builds on what Naomi, what you were saying there, is that the first one, it takes like a more of an evidence-based approach to the type of content we should be posting on the channels that we've got, but also then to work with kind of internal stakeholders to kind of think about, well, this is great, but actually the content needs to be formed in a different way for it to have the most engagement, and we can work with people easier to do that. And it's kind of a little bit, I guess, of an internal education piece as well, so we can help to kind of make sure the community understands like what type of content is going to work really well and when to engage with the team as well. Because I think sometimes there's so much stuff going on, really good work across the business school, but then we might hear about it a little bit too late, or we just come to it at the wrong time, essentially. So it's understanding, kind of working with people around from an evidence base of actually this is the way that we'll engage more people. And I think the other side of it as well is, like I say, we've got different departments that have their own accounts as well. So it's having the guidance that can help them to make the most out of their content that they're creating on their channels as well. Because they do a great job at the moment, but it's not their full-time role. They can dedicate maybe a few hours here and there. So just giving them the guidance and the support, I think, from the work we've done so far will really help in terms of making sure engagement goes as far as possible, all the time, and the return on investment goes as far as possible. So they're kind of the next steps, but it is from that evidence base, and I think that'll really help us to kind of shape our content in the future, and also allow us then to kind of benchmark maybe a key time, maybe in a year, to see actually what changes we make, what worked, what didn't work, what can we tweak together. So it's a real collaborative effort, I think, as well. So yeah, it does help us to push back, but it helps us to kind of educate and work with people in a better way as well. So yeah, it should be really good.
Brilliant. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left before we tell everyone to go to the breakout room. Final question to all three of you. If someone is watching this either on live right now or in the recording, what piece of advice would you give to somebody just kind of starting out and deciding, okay, we want to do this piece of work? And Rob, I'm going to start with you because this isn't on our list of questions. And you can think on your feet.
Yeah, that's fine. I would say keep it simple. Don't try to pack too much into whatever you decide to do, whether it's bringing somebody in, whether it's doing it yourself. If you watch Glasgow's webinar that you did recently, they actually mentioned some of the work they're doing around shifting their content. If you do this and you get to a point where you can tell people why you do and don't put certain content, maybe on your central brand channels versus on a departmental account, you're building better internal relations with your colleagues and saving time. If you're getting content you will say yes to, rather than content you will say no to, that in itself is a good piece of work, because everybody's happier and you haven't got a chain of about 20 emails with somebody maybe copying in a manager trying to get their piece of content up on another channel. Whereas if you've actually been quite clear by doing this piece of work, having the evidence, as Johnny was saying, you've then got better internal relations and a good community of professionals, whether it's your full-time job or part of another job you do on social media.
All right, Johnny, and then Naomi, you're gonna have the closing word.
Yeah, I think it's like what we touched on right at the start. I think just be really clear with the objective of what you want your benchmarking project to kind of tell you as well. So yeah, just be really clear, but also just making sure you just know what is the vital question that you're trying to answer with this exercise as well. And like Rob said, just keeping it simple. I think if you've just got that one thing in mind you want to answer, then focus on that instead of kind of bringing in loads of different people and then having the benchmarking exercise to be trying to answer way too many things, because it just becomes something that will just grow and grow and you'll have too much data and you won't know where to go next. So I think just keep it small, especially as your first one. And then if you're going to benchmark and do this as a yearly exercise as well, maybe add a few more bits to it, but start small, I think, and just be clear with what you want to achieve.
Naomi.
Well, okay, Rob and Johnny, those
were
amazing. I feel like I have very little to add. The only thing I would add is basically keep an open mind. Don't go in with preconceived notions, or if you do, kind of try and let go of them, and be really open to hearing objective insights, because they're so helpful. Yeah, when you're kind of in the weeds of it, it's just the most it's a great bit of clarity. So yeah.
That was a good last word. Brilliant, guys. Well, that wraps up our webinar today. Rob, Naomi, Johnny, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully it's been an enjoyable session for you, because I know it has for me. For anyone else who has joined us today as well, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't do it just yet, but you'll see kind of on the left-hand side of your screen, there's like a little open door icon. What we're going to do after when we finish this live stream is go to the breakout room, which is that little icon, press enter, and then you'll have a chance to turn your camera on and just have kind of like a normal Zoom chat, but it's a forum chat with all of us. But thank you so much again, guys. That's Sam. He came in earlier. Sam the dog, he's getting up and stretching. He's like, let's wrap this thing up. There will be a recording as well, so we'll send that out to everyone. And stay tuned, because we've got we've been planning out like a really cool agenda of more Forumm Academy discussions. Feel free to get in touch with me as well if there's specific topics that you would like us to cover on this series. But thanks again to our guests, and if I see you in the breakout room, that'd be great. Brilliant. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.